Welcome to the Inspiring Tech Leaders podcast with me, Dave Roberts. This week, my special guest is Tony Healy, the Group Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at Ticketer and Non-Executive Director with Trafford Leisure. Tony has also held several other senior roles, including the CIO at Mobica, the Group Information Officer and Security Officer for the Walls Family Enterprise, and the Group IT Director for AES. Tony is a globally experienced, award-winning and industry-recognized CTO and CIO with significant success in leading cross-functional teams to design and integrate leading-edge IT solutions across a range of organizations. Tony is a specialist at launching and delivering programs that safeguard data, streamline operations, automate processes, promote innovation, and advance business needs and strategy. He is a fellow of the BCS, the Chartered Management Institute, and the Chartered Institute of Information Security. What a pleasure to have you here with us today, Tony.
Thank you, Dave. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
So I know you started your IT career working in BT, but was that always the career path that you wanted to take? And did you think you'd get to where you are today?
So I can't say I started out my life thinking I wanted to work in IT. I think if I probably think back to when I was a kid, it was probably, I want to be a policeman, I want to be a fireman type thing. But then reality sort of hits, and I've always had a fondness for technology. I'm not going to say technology, I'm going to say IT, because back at school when we had to wheel the massive BBC computer out and the big monitor, I always had a bit of an interest in that. Always had a bit of an interest in spending a Sunday, spending 5 hours of a Sunday typing code out of a magazine into a screen and keyboard to see a little line appear across my monitor and things like that. So always had a bit of a drive for technology. Fell into BT sort of by accident, really. When I was at college looking for a part-time job, I found an opportunity to go work at BT as a first-line help desk engineer in Manchester, back in what was Grand Island in those days. And then it sort of just escalated from there. I think I got the bug working on the help desk. Then I wanted to go second line, third line. And then I saw all these guys walking around in jeans and shirts, carrying desktop towers around. It was Novell at the time. And it sort of, no, I want to do that. And then it just sort of skyrocketed from there, really.
So I know, during your career, you've worked across multiple companies in a variety of different sectors. Was that a conscious move to change sectors? And what have you learned from that experience?
So when I first started at BT, I thought, what a phenomenal organization. And this is me for life now. And then a realization hit that jobs weren't for life then. My dad worked at BT, so I knew BT very well, and he was there for nearly 30 years. But as you start socializing more with other people who worked in IT in different companies, I started to see how things were done differently. So I wanted to take what I'd learned there and just experience life in other organizations. And, I've touched on transportation, I've touched on insurance, I've touched on ed tech, pharmaceuticals, software services, variety of different industries. And I think you take the best parts out of all of those organizations with you and build up experience. You build up working in regulated environments, you work with HRA, you work at ISO standards, you work in a whole variety of different security scenarios, different governing bodies, etc. And you take the best bits with you to each organization, and you get to see what good looks like. So it's been a really interesting career path, and it's been really interesting to see how different businesses do things. But generally, when you strip it right back, doing what we do, you can apply to any organization. It's just taking the best bits and realizing there's no one size fits all.
No, I absolutely agree. And I've done something very similar in my career. And I've probably always enjoyed the variety as well that you see across different sectors and different organizations. So you've worked within publicly traded organizations and family-run businesses and private equity-backed businesses as well. But what have you enjoyed most about that diversity of culture and organizational focus?
See, that's a really good question. And I think you take different elements out. So the family type businesses, it is a real, everybody knows each other. It's really family orientated. And by that, I mean your personal family. So everyone takes an interest in your children. Everyone wants to know what's going on. And it's a real sort of extended family feel. I think when you then move more into corporates, the larger the organization you go into, it somewhat becomes you are then just, you're an employee, you're a number. But again, it takes a lot to build up a reputation and rapport in the wider organization because there's so many different levels to go through. When you go into private equity, then you'd learn a lot about spreadsheets, numbers, you learn a lot about detail and, what people expect. And I think if you can balance out the whole family team rationale, the PE sort of detail numbers and the corporate structure, and you can apply that to your organization and your team, then you've got a really good balance there of people feeling motivated and being part of your team family, while also knowing what you need to do to get things across the line, whether that's business cases, return on investments, justifications, etc. That experience sort of builds and you can take that into any organization.
Absolutely agree. Did you find working in a PE-backed business that you spent a lot of time thinking about EBITDA and multiples? That's tends to be my experience of working in that environment.
Absolutely, mate. And I think your Excel skills suddenly shoot up a few different levels when you work with PE companies. And it's really interesting to understand, how the finances work. And I take it back to when I first started in IT, probably in the management level. I was thinking, my request I'm asking for £100,000. Well, they should just do it because I need it. But then give it a few more years and you can actually see what that impact is on the bottom line. You then understand the difference between OPEX and CAPEX and the different financial models. And PE certainly takes that to another level, because when things are going very well in PE, everyone's fine and everyone's your friend. But as soon as those numbers start to drop, then it's a whole different level of scrutiny. Again, great experience in retrospect. At the time, not so great because you're panicking about every comma and every zero that's on that spreadsheet. But I think when you get it right, it's really good, and it's educating your team then on, in essence, what you've learned, not to a finance department level, but just getting the basics right with people so they know what a P&L is, they know what EBITDA is, and they know what impact they have on that bottom line.
I did an MBA a number of years ago, and that really stood me in good stead for being able to work within that PE space and environment. They're the sort of skills I think that you do need.
Absolutely. And I think, they should be taught more at school and college level as well, because everyone's going to need some sort of finance understanding when they go into business these days. When you look at, startups, phenomenally intelligent people who do tech startups, but lack the common sense and business knowledge around finances, HR, etc. So absolutely, it should be something that people focus on.
I also know that you've led some really highly successful application development teams. How do you go about creating a team like that and also creating that culture of innovation?
So there's a few different steps, and I've always said I am where I am because of the people who work for me and the teams who have worked for me. And you need to foster a culture of innovation, and that comes through empowerment. So they know that they've got a voice and their voice matters. It's around building a team ethos, so everyone is pointing in the same direction. And it's about accountability and responsibility, which is lacking in some businesses. It's quite hard to implement in organizations that have maybe had a blame culture or maybe had a finger pointing culture at people, because individuals then naturally retreat back into, well, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to come in, do my hours and go home. So there's a lot of work around building in cultures around teams, because if your culture's not right, then your strategy is not going to work. There's a reason that they say culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's very much a case of, if my culture's not right, it doesn't matter what my strategy is, because it's not going to work. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done around team development, team mentoring, developing individuals as well, in order for them to have that voice, and give their ideas and recommendations, in order for them to feel empowered to actually drop you an email with their concerns or their ideas. And it's building upon failure. So it's not letting people be afraid to fail. Failing is natural. And when you look at innovation, when you look at launching 10 different projects, 9 of them may fail, But that one that succeeds is going to be game changing to the organization. And it's realizing in order to get your successes, then sometimes things have to fail. And it's how you react to that. It's how you treat people. It's how you boost confidence. And it's all about empowerment of individuals, mentoring, and then your team seeing you as the go-to person for anything around, career development and things like that. But it's very much down to building trust in teams.
So with technology developing the way there is and the increasing popularity in low code and no code platforms, how do you think that's going to impact development teams in the future?
So I think it's going to impact them slightly. I don't think it's going to be game changing. I think if you look at people who need to develop simple apps or simple applications, then low code, no code, absolutely the way to go. Much more GUI interface, much more drag and drop, and quite a lot of applications go like that. You look at sort of Power BI compared to when Crystal Reports first started coming out, or you look at the new ways of interfacing with Cisco routers. Years ago, it used to be command line. You used to have a little book of different codes that you used to type in there. So I think there's definitely a place for low code and no code. But when you get more into the high-end back office, high-end front-end applications where you need to do multiple integrations, you need to do multiple APIs, you need to look at how that feeds into multiple different systems, I think there is always going to be a place for the C++s of the world, the Javas of the world, etc., Python, etc. And it's really just looking at what we need to do and how we balance the two. Schools, colleges, universities are doing more around coding now, which is really good because I think there will be a skills shortage, but it's getting the right level of skills and experience at the right level of organization to determine what you need to deliver. If I just want a quick app that does something or does a little bit of automation, lots of tools out there can do it GUI interfaced. But when you start getting into the real nitty gritty, there's always going to be a need for high-end development talent.
Have you found, though, that it provides a level of democratization almost around technology development, application development, and you have people now being able to create apps who maybe don't have a full understanding of the security layer that's required around application development as well? And there are potentially some risks with that. So for want of a better word, digital dabblers getting involved in application development. Is that something that you've come across?
It is, and I'm going to steal that because I quite like that, digital dabblers. So I'm going to take that with me into my next board meeting. But I think we've had this throughout technology for years and years, and you'll know better than me that boards and senior management teams, when they have a little bit of knowledge, they're more dangerous than no knowledge at all. The amount of conversations I've had with CEOs, CFOs, non-execs, etc., who have been out on a golf course or been on holiday with somebody who's got an app for doing something, and then they suddenly come back and think the entire business can be run off an app on an iPad because they've seen or they've heard something which is not completely understood, is absolutely true. And in technology, we've had to fend this off for quite some time. And in quite a lot of businesses I've been in, and when you sit around that top table and when you sit around talking to the exec teams, everybody wants to be a CIO or CTO because they all have an opinion on how things should be done. They all have ideas on what you should be doing. And the amount of emails that you get with recommendations on solutions to look at is ridiculous, because no one in that room turns around to the CFO and starts talking about different accountancy standards. No one turns around and starts talking to the head of legal about how they should be doing things. And I think Apple were a key player in this when they brought the iPad out, very much targeted at the consumer, who then brought it into corporate, and then it was IT departments and tech departments' job to integrate that into an infrastructure securely. So digital dabblers have been around for a long time in many different guises. I think the coding element is just another layer that we need to sort of bear in mind and work with.
You're right. They have been around for a long time and different names. I think we used to call it shadow IT for a number of years.
Exactly, yeah.
I think one of the things we have discovered there around shadow IT, and I've talked about this previously, is the importance to actually encourage that level of innovation and thinking, but have it in a controlled way that there's governance around it and putting that structure in place to support it. So you get the ideas, but you actually get it filtered through in the correct way. Which is that something you've also seen?
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. And I think when people start looking or talking about shadow IT and departments are doing their own thing, there's a couple of reasons. One, well, maybe the wider technology department isn't delivering what the business needs, and therefore they're having to find their own solutions. And two, I've been around long enough to remember when we used to be the tech police and the IT police, and we dictated what you could do with your kit. We dictated what kit you had, and we pretty much ruled the roost. And that's changed, and it's become much more consumer, customer, end user led now. And I think the IT departments of old who aren't keeping up with that will then sort of come across shadow IT more and more, because people don't have the patience to wait months and years for things to be delivered now. So they will go out and find their own solutions and their own workarounds. And I think as leaders, what we need to do is realize it's happening in our business, not necessarily close it down, but as you said, talk to them and bring it into the right security fold, bring it into the right container, whatever that may be, excuse me, and however that may look. But in essence, what they're doing is they're innovating. They're finding solutions to something that the IT or technical departments didn't do. And we should embrace it. Yes, it's wrong. Yes, there needs to be more rigor around it. But we should also be listening to these people, because they're doing the day-to-day job and they know how it impacts their life better than we do. So it's about working in partnership.
Couldn't agree more. But with cybersecurity being such a critical issue these days, how do you ensure that an organization can remain efficient and reliable, but also, more importantly, secure?
I mean, cybersecurity should keep everybody awake, and no matter how much money we're spending on it, it's not enough. You look in the press over the last couple of days, and you look at the big ransomware attacks in the US, and the really scary thing about that is organizations weren't targeted. It was a security solution that was supposed to be protecting them that was targeted. So a lot of these companies had no way out of this, because the tool or platform which they invested in to protect them was the one that actually became infected and held them to ransom. So we need to be as worried as anybody around security. There is no right answer for this, but what we need to do is ensure education's in place for our users. We need to ensure that when we're working as dev teams, engineering teams, infrastructure network, whatever it is, security is not seen as an afterthought. It is part of the solution that we're trying to deliver. Because if we leave it till the end, that's when security gets a bad reputation around, well, they're delaying things and they're making us do things in a certain way, and all these types of issues and noise that we've heard throughout the years. But it's education of people. I mean, the amount of dev teams that I've worked with in the past who refuse to have any type of antivirus software or any type of network scanning or vulnerability scanning on the systems because they thought it was going to impact their work and stop them doing things. That's just not the case. There's a perception that because we talk about security, we're going to stop you doing your role and we're going to slow you down. Well, we're not. In essence, what we're doing is we're just making sure that the business is protected, you as a dev or an engineering are protected, and more importantly, our customers are protected. Because it's about when you get hit by an attack, whether it be a ransomware attack or a virus attack, it's reputational damage as well. All people need to do is Google a company name. And if you're dotted with articles around being breached, having ransomware attacks, that's going to put people off using your organization. So we need to have a proper incident management plan in place. We need to educate the business on why we are being cyber secure aware. And we need to make people realize that we're trying to protect them as individuals as well, because they don't want their personal HR information, salary details, bank details being leaked all over the web. And it's getting that mindset in people that we want to make the process as efficient as possible, but for these reasons. So suppose that, what I'm trying to say is don't impose security protocols on people without explaining why you're doing it. Because if you explain it, people will probably be a lot more open to implementing it.
Absolutely. I think there has been a increase in the number of new roles appearing in the area of DevSecOps, for example, and the traditional model of having an application development team that develops something and then it goes through vulnerability scanning and then has a pen test on it. Perhaps that is becoming an outdated way of working. If you think about actually security by design should be built into the absolute foundation of the code from the very beginning. Is that something that you're encouraging your development teams to do?
Yeah, and we've got something called security champions. So it's an individual in each of the teams who steps up and takes ownership for that security by design. So it's there to be the sort of devil's advocate, if you will, when they're talking about design and coding. Their role as a security champion is to lead the conversation on security principles and security protocol. And I absolutely agree with you. I think there is absolutely a place for pen testing, and there's absolutely a place for security teams. And when you look at the different tools that are out there, there's lots of them that will protect an organization. But security champions in our organization, we thought this is the way forward, because we don't want to hinder that development. We don't want people to have to stop during a sprint to come and speak to the security team. We want it embedded, and it should be part of the natural conversation. And that comes with time, when it's enabling people to free up that time to become a security champion, to go through the right training, and have the voice and confidence that they can say something in the team. Because what they don't want to do is report back to the CISO on a quarterly basis or monthly basis on issues, problems, progress, and then suddenly find, well, I told the team this is what we need to think of, and they ignored me. Well, that's not an excuse anymore. And it's very much, as you said, it's security by design, it's development by design, it's all end to end, and it's just a natural progression.
So when communicating to the board, what do you think are those key factors that we need to demonstrate the value of technology?
First of all, it's not standing up at the board and talking to them at a technical level. It's about telling them a story and taking them on a journey. It's about showing the business benefit of doing these things or doing these projects, whether that's customer led, whether that's looking at what we need to do internally. I think there's a story which you can tell for every type of project that you're trying to do. And it's looking at how that either mitigates risk, how it can potentially drive revenue, how it can potentially optimize or streamline processes. And if possible, what are the hard and soft benefits around that? Metrics are a great thing, and boards love a nice metric, because if they can measure it, then they want to see it improved, and they want to see it as a KPI on a dashboard, etc. So it's learning how to tell the story about the value that tech brings to the business or the customer. And if you can convert that to a monetary value, they'll understand it a lot quicker. It becomes a little bit trickier around soft benefits. So when you're trying to optimize and improve certain processes, and that's when the conversation goes into overhead spend and what you're trying to target, etc. But I think some of the key factors are around metrics. So what is our metric now, and what's it going to be, and how's it going to improve? How is it going to improve our bottom line? How is it going to make our customers' lives easier and want them to stay with us longer and potentially buying more product from us? It's looking at where we can drive efficiencies across the organization and make things happen quicker, which then leads into the whole process discussion in departments and how teams should be structured. So I think there's a lot that you can bring to a boardroom, but it's not about standing up and telling them the technical nitty-gritty of a project and how it's going to integrate and how it's going to interact with something. It's about telling them a story. And if you can visualize it as well and get the benefit across to the business, the customer, or the bottom line, then you're on to a very good thing. If you just go in with a technical mindset, you're not going to get anywhere with them.
Couldn't agree more. And I had this conversation recently, and we were talking about really it's moving digital IT, moving that up the value chain. So you've got to get the basics right, and you've got to then prove that you can move from being an overhead to being a revenue generator for the organization. And that's the bit that really helps to differentiate technology in the eyes of the board.
Yeah, I agree. And it's moved from being, well, it's just a cost, it's an IT cost, the biggest cost in the business type thing too. How are you actually going to generate more value for my organization? How are you going to potentially create new revenue streams? How are you going to help innovate what we do for that customer so we continue to be market lead? Because the moment we take our eye off the ball and we become complacent, somebody's going to overtake us.
So what have been your career highlights to date, and what do you think has been the proudest moments in your career so far?
So I think project-wise, there's been so many, from creation of new globalized platforms, to creation of new data centers, or being part of a team that delivered and built and coded a brand new end-to-end application. But I think, to me personally, I think that the proudest moments are when I see talent develop, and when I bring people in, maybe at a first or second line level, or maybe at a junior software engineer or a junior security level, and you watch them develop and you watch them build and you watch them go on to be amazing at what they do in other organizations. I think that's the thing that drives me, is seeing other people do well and seeing the benefit of some of my training and some of my lessons learned. So I'm a huge fan of telling people my successes as well as mistakes, because if they can learn from them, then they can get to where they need to be quicker. But it's watching people develop, and it's watching people excel. And if they're in the right role with the right support and the right training, it's something amazing to watch, where you can watch an engineer come on board, and then you check in with people every now and again, and so they're a director of IT or they're a CISO, they've sort of progressed through the ladder. And to be a part of that journey, I think, is what makes it really good, proud moments in my career, is that I've helped impact and drive others to do well.
Excellent. So what do you think was the best bit of advice that you received during your career ascent, and what advice would you give to others who are probably just starting out on that journey now?
So probably a few nuggets. I think one is learn how to tell a story. So learn how to engage people. Second is treat people how you would want to be treated as a leader. There's no point going into leadership with a massive ego, because when you're with your team, you are probably the least important person in that room. The people who do and deliver on a daily basis, the most important people. So don't lead with an ego, and be very open to challenge, be very open to change, and give people the empowerment to challenge you. Because as a leader, we don't have all the answers. We have some of the answers, and we have some of the experience to back it up. But in organizations, there are people who know more than us. And it's very much a case of just being open and listen to people. And that helps build trust, and that helps build a variety of different things which will help you succeed in that organization. And be open and honest. If you're big enough to take the glory, then you're big enough to take things when it's not going quite so good. But don't throw people under a bus. As a leader, you are fundamentally accountable, and you are accountable for the bad as well as the good.
Fantastic advice. So it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, Tony. And I'd just like to thank you once again for sharing those career insights and experience, and being part of the Inspiring Tech Leaders podcast.
Thanks a lot, Dave. It's always a pleasure. I enjoy our chats, and I look forward to more in the future.
Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and stay tuned for more Inspiring Tech Leaders.